Let's take a look at an improper integral, but this one is type 2. What do we mean by type 2? Well, I'm going to explain in a second, so let me just write this down. And type 2 integral may look completely normal. Like you're looking at it, it's like, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that when you try to plug in one of the endpoints, in this case, it's the upper one, right? Upper limit into the function, you are dividing by 0, right? Square root of 8 minus 8. Well, 8 minus 8 is 0, and you got a 0 on the bottom. However, it could happen actually that this integral will converge to a number. Sometimes it diverges, sometimes it converges, but what it takes to decide is to integrate and then see what happens. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. How are we going to integrate something like this? Well, this has to be done by substitution. Okay, we're going to go ahead and say let u be 8 minus x. Then what is du? So here I'm just going to say, okay, du will be the derivative of 8 minus x. Now, 8 minus x is a line, and the slope of it is negative 1. So be careful because this is minus. This is going to be negative 1. So negative will come over here. So put negative 1, which means that dx is going to be negative du. Right? Okay, so let's start to compute this. This is going to be 1 over square root of u and then du, but the minus I can just pull outside. Now, what is this integral? What's that equal to? How do we integrate something like that? Well, what we need to know is how we can convert this to u to some power. Now, hopefully you remember that square root is power 1/2. But when it's on the bottom, that means it's going to be negative 1/2. Right? Because you can always put the square root from the bottom to the top, move it, but then the power becomes negative. So if you were to integrate something like this, you need to add 1 to the power, and it'll be u to the negative 1/2 plus 1, which is going to be u to the positive 1/2. And then you're dividing by 1/2, which is the same as multiplying by 2. Okay, so your answer is going to be negative 2, and let's convert u to the 1/2 back to square root. So this is going to be square root of u, but what's u? Well, that's 8 minus x. So this is going to be my answer over here. And next we are going to investigate what happens to this integral at 8. Because remember, 8 was the problem. 0 was not the problem. Okay, so what we'll do is just go ahead and open up our Desmos calculator and enter our answer function using capital F, right? So this is our antiderivative. First, the problem point 8 with the minus. Why, first of all, why with the minus? What does that mean? Basically, you are on the interval from 0 to 8. So just imagine this is your interval and you're integrating over it. You cannot leave this interval. So your interval is going to stay from 0 to 8. You can't approach 8 from the right side because it's like that doesn't exist there, okay? So you are going over here from the left, which means you're getting closer and closer to 8, like 7.9, 7.99, 7.999, and so on. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to plug in something like 8, subtract 0.1. Okay, so I did that. Then I'm going to subtract 0.01. So I'm approaching 8, but from the left side. So I keep subtracting a small number. Now, so far, I don't really know what's going on. How about 0.001? And again. So you just keep adding these zeros and see what happens. Now, at some point, you hopefully will understand that this thing is going to get very, very close to 0, right? Because what is 10 to the power negative 5? That just means move the decimal point 5 to the left. So you have like 4 zeros and a 6. And if you keep doing that, you will see how it's going to become more and more closer and closer to 0. In fact, in this case, we can actually compute the value of the function at 8, and that's going to be 0. But that's really not the same as asking the limit. The limit happens as you keep increasing these, getting closer and closer to 8 and seeing what happens. So as I keep doing that, I get a smaller and smaller number, and basically in the limit, this is going to be 0. So this is going to be 0. And then what happens at 0? Well, if we plug it in, unfortunately here I have to plug it by hand. I can't really use my calculator because it gives me a decimal, and usually decimal values are not allowed, but not a problem. I can plug in 0 here. I'm going to get negative 2 square root of 8. Okay, so that's gonna go in here. If you want to, you can also make this prettier by converting the square root of 8 into 2 square root of 2 if you want. So this is actually negative 4 square roots of 2, but that's not necessary. Now, the final answer, you're going to subtract these two. So 0 subtract a negative will be a positive, and that's going to be 2 square root of 8. Now, here's when we're going to decide, is it going to be convergent or divergent? In order to decide, we just ask ourselves, is this a number, or is it something like that's not a number, like infinity, negative infinity, maybe it doesn't exist? Now, because it's a number, this is going to converge.